Welcome everyone to the third installment of NAU's Wellness Webinar Series. It's my pleasure to introduce Keith Osborne. Keith is an alum of NAU Colorado Springs. In 2003, he received his bachelor's in business administration, and in 2005, he earned his bachelor's in applied management. He was the 2014 Distinguished Service Alumni Award recipient for Colorado Springs. Keith is an ergonomist with Seattle City Light, the city's utility company, and also serves as an independent ergonomist and wellness program consultant. In August 2002, Keith retired from the U.S. Army after serving for almost 25 years. Ergonomics is the science of maximizing worker efficiency, focusing on comfort, safety, and wellness. Keith will discuss the importance of ergonomics in the workplace for employers and employees, and strategies for implementation. He welcomes questions as we go, so feel free to ask your questions at any time or enter your questions in the chat box. Thank you, Keith, and welcome.
Well, thank you, Tammy, for the introduction, and thank you to everybody who's attending today. I've been doing ergonomics probably about 12 to 13 years now, and prior to that, I was in the Army for 25 years. Ergonomics was kind of an offshoot, if you will, of the military in the sense that while I was in, I had suffered a few injuries, neck and back injuries and things like that. So once I was out of the military, I noticed that it didn't matter how I sat or what I did, it always felt like I was in pain. So that kind of intrigued me. And as we go through this presentation, you'll see how pain mitigation is key to ergonomics, as well as the integration of wellness, and also how we can get people to be more productive. And if we're more productive, then we're less prone to injury over time. So let's go ahead and dive in. Okay. Doesn't seem to want to advance.
Yeah, you do have control, so oops.
Oh.
If you want, Keith, I could do it, or
yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Let's just, I think if you go ahead and advance them.
okay, there we go.
There we go. So, and go ahead next one. So our outline for today, a brief overview, kind of what is ergonomics. Why do we do ergonomics? What's the whole rationale behind that? Obtaining some buy-in. How do we go ahead and identify our stakeholders? How do we figure out how to get buy-in? And then we'll go through some case studies. We'll talk about the wellness integration, some online tools, and how we can better utilize those and leverage those to be more successful. Then we'll do a review, and if there aren't any questions during the presentation, if you have some at the end, I'll go ahead and field those as well. Next. So all the data and information that I show you throughout this presentation come from these sources primarily, and also from the data that I maintain either while I was here at City Light or back when I was at Honeywell, the metrics and things that I use to drive the processes there. But these are my major sources of data and information. Next. So why do we do ergonomics? Ergonomics is a science of fitting jobs to people. So it improves the fit between the worker and their workplace. We're not necessarily fitting people into jobs, we're fitting jobs to people. So what I mean by that is you want to go ahead and have that particular job task fit that person. So you don't want to have a job task and say we can only hire people who are 5'7" to 5'9", because that's what it's designed to do, because now you've left out 90% of your population or 99% of your population. It's a scientific approach, but it's also very practical in the sense that there's a lot of common sense in ergonomics. If you see something that doesn't seem right, well, it probably isn't right. And it's probably a small little change or an adjustment or surface height or something like that needs to be fixed in order to get that person comfortable and more productive. It's an integral part of everything we do in the workplace. It recognizes your employees' capabilities. It allows you and your workforce to kind of understand their jobs and their tasks a little bit better. It also takes into and understands physical attributes, which is a lot of the wellness aspect that kind of feeds into ergonomics. And it helps you also to redefine work processes to make yourself a lot more lean, a lot more efficient over time. Next. So statistically, It takes about 14 days to recover from a workplace musculoskeletal disorder. That's the abbreviation WMSD. The older you are, and by older I mean above the age of 45, it takes you 3 to 5 days longer to recover from an injury. Younger people bounce back quicker, and it doesn't matter if it's an office type injury or if it's an industrial type injury. Carpal tunnel syndrome, which is a big thing more in the office than it is anywhere else, 32 days away is the average. And that's a lot of time lost for an organization. The workplace musculoskeletal disorders, they account for over 45 to 60 billion in indirect costs and 15 to 20 billion in direct costs. The direct costs being the injury and the workman comp payout directly. The indirect costs are having to hire temps. If you have a job that requires a security clearance, now you have to go run a security clearance on your temp worker. Over time, if you don't hire temps and you have other people try to fill in, the loss in productivity because these folks are not concentrating on their jobs, they're doing their job and the job of the person that's out. So that's where all these numbers come from. In 2013 alone, work-related musculoskeletal disorders accounted for 33% of all the injuries in the workplace. That's pretty high. Next. So some of the benefits of ergonomics, we can decrease injuries and illnesses, and we can cut our workman comp costs. So that's a big number nowadays for a lot of organizations. How can we cut our healthcare cost runs? How can we cut our workman comp cost runs? You can do that by making folks more efficient at work. If you have people who are more efficient at work and you take away waste and you take away unnecessary movements and you fit those people to the jobs that they're doing, you've eliminated the chances of them getting injured, which then goes back to impacting the injuries and illnesses. It's a critical part of any Lean Six Sigma initiative. So if you're kind of outside the office, this is more of a production kind of a thing. So if you're working those Six Sigma Lean initiatives or like a Honeywell operating system or Toyota quality management, this ergonomic program and the wellness initiatives are critical to having these things work a lot more efficiently. It increases people's physical well-being. It'll also decrease absenteeism and turnover. The more inviting your workplace is, the better chance you have of employees actually wanting to stay there and work and not using it as a pit stop for a cup of coffee where they move on to another position because they were never comfortable in their workplace and there was no one there to kind of help them out. We can also decrease presenteeism. Presenteeism is a worker coming to work, but there's an injury or they're just not feeling 100%, so they're there, but they're not there. That's what presenteeism means. At any given time in the United States, 50% of the workers at a workplace suffer from presenteeism. So the key to a good ergonomics process is to drive that presenteeism number down, which again impacts your productivity and also decreases and mitigates the chances of risk. The bigger bonus here also is you have an increase in employee morale. Employees are a lot happier to come to work because they know there's advocates there. There are champions that are trying to make that workplace a better place to be. Next.
Oops.
And go ahead and click on the next one. So we're going to go ahead and talk about why we're going to integrate wellness into this. Work sites that have physical activity programs, and you can see the statistics here from the Health and Human Services, 20 to 50% reduction in healthcare cost runs. So that's a very significant money outlay. 7 to 32% decrease in short-term sick leave. So people taking a day off just because something hurts and they don't want to come to work. If you have good worksite wellness programs integrated into your ergonomics process, you can impact those numbers quite significantly. A 4 to 52% increase in productivity. I want to know who the people are that got the 52% increase in productivity, because that's just incredibly huge. But that range kind of shows you if you have programs that work and they're dynamic and they're employee-centric and company organizational-centric, you can really make a good impact in driving costs down, which impacts your return on investment, which then makes ergonomics and wellness a smart thing for your organization. Next. So in my head, and since I've been doing this, I've always had it's part of my background is a master fitness trainer and a personal trainer and also a certified wellness specialist. So I've always seen this natural integration to ergonomics with wellness because they both impact the well-being of an employee. They both impact productivity because the healthier an employee is, the more efficient they're going to be at work. And again, it can help drive down your cost claims and your comp runs and all that, but it also shows employees they're more than a number. If you have these things working for you, your employee again feels energized and they feel like the company is there for them and they're not just a number. Okay, next.
Is that typical, Keith, that ergonomics and wellness are combined in the workplace for most employers?
It's becoming more typical. A lot of larger organizations are seeing that the integration of these two processes makes a whole lot more sense than keeping them siloed. I would say 10 years ago, probably not, but more and more, and every time I go back to the ergonomics conferences and talk on this topic, more and more companies are integrating them, yeah.
Right, yeah, it does. It makes complete sense.
Oh, sure. So where's your program at? And this is any organization that wants to start a program or try to figure out what a program has to be or needs to be or wants to be, you've got to figure out all this stuff out. So, you know, what's the understanding of ergonomics at an organization? Do they think it's some sort of a nice shiny option? You know, when we in-process people, we give them water bottles and coffee cups. Do they think ergonomics is along the lines of a coffee cup? Are they just not sure how to integrate it? And is it a key process that's integrated in every aspect of their business? In other words, do they have an understanding of ergonomics and they know how to implement it and have it ingrained in every decision that they make? If that's the case, then they're way ahead of the power curve in a lot of organizations. Then the next thing you need to figure out is where your process is at. Is it non-existent? And as I talk about where I was at Honeywell, that's where we were initially. Here at Seattle City Light, when I first got here, we were definitely in the reactive mode. If your process is in a proactive mode, that means you understand your leading indicators, your lagging indicators, you have good metrics, you have good support, you have money that you can use, and so you're in a really good place. And probably don't need to hear this presentation. or is your organization kind of a combination of all of those? Is there some sort of a continuous improvement mechanism, like I mentioned, Six Sigma or Lean? Are they part of the OSHA Voluntary Protection Program Partnership Association? I know that's a mouthful, but what that is OSHA goes around and certifies safety programs. And they can either certify you as a merit site or a star site based on how well you've integrated safety into your work culture. Ergonomics is a really big key to all this. And then again, I mentioned the Toyota Quality Management System with the Kaizen events and the 5S's. Honeywell operating system is basically Toyota Quality Management. It just has the Honeywell logo. It's the exact same process. Next. So do you understand the differences between microergonomics and macroergonomics? Microergonomics is an impact on each single workstation, is your analysis and your understanding of each individual workstation within an organization. It shows you how poorly installed or poorly adjusted impacts your productivity, your workflows, how it impacts your injury rates, and your better understanding of how you can fix each one of your high and medium risk workstations will help you, again, drive down your costs. Macroergonomics is kind of the 50,000 foot level, the organizational size look at ergonomics. How does it impact processes at an organizational level? How designs impact your return on investment, and also how it impacts the efficiencies in a workplace. Even in an office workplace, are folks making less mistakes when they're typing and keying and mousing and doing the things that they do on a PC? Next. So what stage is your ergonomics process? There's kind of 4 or 5 different stages here. Non-existent, there's no program, there's no mechanisms in place to measure, assess, or correct. In other words, you're not tracking anything. If you're reactive with no formal support, what that generally means is that you're tracking lagging indicators. You're chasing injuries. You're chasing data. You're not actually producing data that shows a positive effect on an organization. You kind of assess and measure, but you really don't have any corrective actions, and everybody needs a medical note for everything or some sort of additional approval prior to being able to just say, this is what this person needs, let's go get it. If you're reactive and you have some support, you're a little bit better off because you have some support, you have You have some things in place that give you the things that you need to be successful, but you're still relying on those lagging indicators. In other words, you're still chasing injuries. So that's kind of the difference, a little bit of a difference between those two. Early proactive, you're starting to understand that you can get ahead of injuries if you start being a little bit smarter with how we assess our individuals. You have some corrective actions that are completed quickly. We call that low-hanging fruit. In other words, if it's something that's easy to fix, like somebody just needs a keyboard and mouse, you're able to go out and get that quickly, and you don't have to wait a month to have something come in. Matured proactive, online tools, you're using them, you're building metrics, you have assessments that are streamlined, annual assessments for employees. I think that's one of the key things. And in any of the processes that I've built and ones that I'm building now, annual assessments for employees are critical, because then you can always baseline where you're at the beginning of the year and know who your high risks are and work on those as your priority. And then a self-governing proactive, you can pretty much get anybody in there to run that process, and they can't screw it up. You have leading indicators that are driving the process. You've got lagging indicators, which actually are leading indicators, but once they're archived, they're your lagging indicators. They're your historical data. And you use all that stuff for validation. Your stakeholders, their buy-in's complete. Everybody knows what they do in the process. They own that part of the process, and they're always continuously improving. The big thing about a proactive process is there's always continuous improvement. You don't get to a level and then just stay there. There's always something that you can do better.
Keith, do you see this being housed like in an HR department? I'm thinking of an office environment versus a utility company or a manufacturer, that kind of thing.
Sure. Well, I'm actually in the HR department. We're safety, but we're under HR. Okay. When I was at Honeywell, we were in the safety/facilities department. So honestly, it kind of depends on the organizational makeup where they put the ergonomist or the health and wellness specialist.
And do you see that it's sometimes or often outsourced, like a vendor that might help with these sorts of things, or not usually?
Generally, a smaller company will try to outsource this, because in some instances, it doesn't make sense for them to try to do this in-house. Larger organizations try to keep it in-house because you can kind of keep some of your costs down a little bit lower. Plus, then you have that person inside your organization that you can go to quickly and not have to wait to call somebody in. So, right. To me, it kind of depends on the size of the organization, really.
Thanks.
Sure. So what do you need to elevate your process? You need a process structure, and you've got to be able to identify your stakeholders. The process needs to be written clearly. You need to define roles, and there has to be mechanisms for continuous improvement. In other words, what type of metrics are you going to track so that every year you can look at it and go, okay, here's our weak spot. Let's go ahead and attack that the first few months of the year. These are our strong points. We can kind of hold serve on those and just maintain and monitor those. Who are your stakeholders? Who owns what? And how and what are they going to contribute to the overall success of the process? And then you got to hold them accountable. You've got to say, okay, these are the metrics. These are the numbers I'm going to pull from you. Like your return to work coordinator. What are our comp costs? Are they going up? Are they going down? Are we impacting the time it takes to get somebody back to work full up? Are we closing those days down? Are we doing this? Are we closing cases totally because we've fixed what is wrong? And then case study data. You want to have a starting point for your process. A good case study is going to build support and buy-in for those stakeholders that we've identified. Case studies, depending on how mature your process is, could be often more times than not the win or lose point for management support. If you do a good case study, and it's always good to get a few managers in that case study, because if they can see and physically feel the impact of a good ergonomics program, they're more inclined to support it long term. And when I talk about what happened at Honeywell, you'll see how that was kind of key for that process to actually get anywhere. Next. So stakeholders and their roles. So things you need to ask yourself about stakeholders and their roles. Who are they? What's the role? Who's going to champion the process? There's always got to be that one go-to person or one go-to group that's going to run your process. Okay, be it the ergonomist, be it an industrial hygienist or a safety person or an HR person. but that person needs to have knowledge of ergonomics. They need to have knowledge of health and wellness initiatives. So someone's got to be smart to be the champion of the process. And how do you get buy-in from your stakeholders? Again, we'll talk about that as how you build metrics and how we do case studies and things like that. And what are they accountable for? Generally, metrics come from HR, finance, and facilities. Process input, HR, facilities, and others can also kind of impact your process input. How's that document going to look? You don't want a huge document. I don't think I've ever written a process document for ergonomics that was more than about 5 pages. Because people lose interest. It's kind of like a long meeting. Everybody loses interest after about 30 minutes. It's the same thing with a long document. You don't want your process document to be just burdensome. Next. Who are your stakeholders? Managers, supervisors, employees, and they all have different things that they're going to feed into your process and feed into that being a success. Managers need to understand all the processes that they're responsible for. That's a whole lot to do, but that's why they're managers. You want them to encourage the continuous improvement. They're the ones who are going to encourage the supervisors and employees under them to buy in and actually use this process to feel better when they're working, to be more productive when they're working, and also to be safer when they're working to mitigate injuries. Supervisors need to get trained. Managers also need to get trained. There's training out there that they can take. It doesn't mean they have to be certified. Just, Ergonomics 101. What's ergonomics and how does it impact us here at our workplace? Employees, they need to have the ability to report early. They need to be able to have their stuff fixed early. And they need to take ownership of this process as well. In other words, if they don't participate, they're not going to get the benefit of it. And when they do all those things, you'll see improved morale from your employees. Buy-in from employees is key, but also the supervisors and managers. You got to have everybody. So some additional stakeholders. All these departments have a piece of the pie. Here at Seattle City Light they did, and also at Honeywell they did. HR, that's where I pull all my workman comp, ADA, and wellness notes and metrics from. Facilities, work with the facilities folks. They're the ones who do the build-outs, the office designs, the moves. They also control the HVAC and the lighting. So if that's part of ergonomics. So if there's lighting issues and HVAC issues within a certain workspace, then maybe you can work with facilities to figure out how that can be kind of tweaked. Safety, the ergonomist may be in this department, but safety generally oversees these kinds of things. They want to make sure that the build outs and the changes and the ergonomic things are done and they don't put employees at risk. Finance, they're the folks with the money. So if you can build your metrics, show them that this is an efficient process, and ergonomics is always an efficient process, in my opinion. Your metrics will drive that budget and how much money you're going to get. And the engineers, probably not so much maybe at National American University in that sense, but other organizations that design things, that they design tools, they design any kind of thing, widgets, doesn't matter what it is. Engineers are key to that process flow. So if you get engineers in there to look at it and build it right the first time, it's way cheaper than trying to retroactively fit something. Additional stakeholders, and these are all external. You got to get really good equipment vendors. If you have a really good ergonomic equipment vendor that you can work with, they're going to be able to give you the best prices and also offer some advice and maybe some ideas on solutions for your workplace. And then also if you have industrial and field equipment vendors, but we're a publicly owned utility here at Seattle City Light, so the public has some say in what we do and how we spend our money. So it's vital that the ergonomics process up here shows efficiencies, otherwise it won't get funded, and I'll probably be golfing a lot more than I do now. So next slide. So some of the specific departments also have a stake, but they generally fall into these categories. I don't really go much more outside of departments other than these three. HR, finance, and facilities. They're really the key players in all this. HR with the return to work issues. The wellness coordinator is often in HR. I've seen that more times than not. Integration of wellness and ergonomics is becoming more prevalent. Like I said, about 10 years ago, they were siloed and rarely spoke to each other. But the more I've dug into this process and the more I've dug into the science of ergonomics and really the science of wellness and well-being of your employees, there really is a lot of stuff that meshes together. Finance, good metrics drive your budgetary considerations, and good metrics allow for your program to expand. As long as you're tracking good ROIs and you're tracking good metrics and you're getting that return on investment for the things that you're doing, and you're driving down high risks to medium risks and mediums to low, you'll always have money and budget available. Facilities, they do all the heavy lifting. They do the workstation configurations, furniture changes. A lot of times they're the ones that you have to order the approved non-IT equipment, you know, monitor arms and things of that nature. So it's important to work with facilities and have them an integral part of talking to the vendors, so that there's a really good relationship between facilities, you, and the vendor. Next. Safety always is safety is involved in everything, in just about any organization. A lot of times the ergonomics process owner is in safety because they have a safety or an IH background as well. It just depends. Some organizations have safety and facilities together. So that dynamic is a little bit different, but safety is always going to want to have a look to see what you're doing and to make sure that you're not causing more risk, but you're actually lowering and mitigating risk. And then, like I talked about engineering, again, not so much maybe at National American University, but other larger industrial organizations, engineering is key to this. Next.
Oops. There we go.
So your ergonomics program coordinator is a busy person. They monitor the program, they maintain the training records, they schedule manager, supervisor, and worker training. Sometimes they're the ones who actually give the training. It depends. For me here, I give all the office type training. The industrial type training is all done via web, so it's all set up, and I don't really have to do anything. I just have to assign it to folks. And then you're the one who tracks all the metrics. You build your metrics. You have the spreadsheets. If you have online programs and tools, those things generally build their own metrics. So all you have to do is pull that data and provide it to the managers so they can see what's going on. So that you provide documentation, summaries upon request to managers and supervisors. I report every 3 months to the Executive Safety Council up here, so they get a dump of all my data every 3 months, so they know what's going on pretty efficiently. Next. Also ensure the personnel are performing worksite evaluations. So if you have folks that are working under you to help you with this process, you want to make sure that all those evaluations and training are done correctly. You want to make sure that the control measures that you've talked about are being implemented and being implemented in a timely manner. It doesn't do any good to say this is what we want to do, and then you wait 4 months to try to implement something. In that 6 months, you could end up with 10 more injuries. You want to ensure that a system's in place for workers to report these things to their supervisors so they can have a quicker turnaround to have their issues resolved. Next. So the important question is, how do we get buy-in? For a middle to large company, you want to build case studies. You want to use a cross-section of your organization. So if you have an organization with various departments, finance and HR and IT, and say you have architects and whoever, use a certain number of people from each parts of those organizations as your case study. Try to get an online organization or an online tool organization to give you a trial run. There's a lot of these companies that will let you use their tool and do a case study with that tool, in the hopes, obviously, that you're going to buy their tool, but it'll allow you to do a case study to be able to turn this documentation and these numbers into your supervisor and your managers, so you can kind of prove why we need to do this. You want to look to integrate with other processes, like I mentioned before, wellness. Wellness is, I'm telling you, ergonomics and wellness, if you can get these two things integrated together, it's such a cost-plus thing for your organization. Show the efficacy by developing metrics that show improvement. You want to have others that show where you're lacking, don't get me wrong, but the metrics that support the process will always show improvement, because as you build your process will always become more efficient, and you'll always be able to have positive metrics. As your process develops, matures, and maintains these metrics, it almost kind of builds itself, and the data will then become the cornerstone of your process. Any good process that's out there has really good data and tracks a lot of different data points. And I'll talk more about data points later here. Next. So for small companies, like I mentioned before, it's a little bit more difficult for a small company to kind of do this internally, but if they're going to try to do it internally, it's best just split your company in half. You use that as your case study. Half your employees will get all the nice bells and whistles that you can provide ergonomically for them: monitor arms, floor mats, sit-stand stations, fitted chairs, keyboards and mice, everything. While the other half just keeps plugging along the way they are. And at the end of that data point dump, which is usually 6 months down the road, it'll be very easy to show which half is way more efficient and way more productive, and which half is probably sore and injured and very envious of the other half. So again, look to integrate wellness and other processes into this so you can see how ergonomics can help drive the success and productivity of these other processes. Again, you develop your metrics showing those improvements, just like you would with a larger company or a medium-sized company. Again, that data will, again, become the cornerstone of your process. Next. So I keep talking about metrics, and here we go. So why are they important? They provide the basis for your program development. If you're not measuring it, no one can tell whether or not you're successful. So if you have no numbers to show what you've been doing, I can guarantee you no one will want to hand you money to continue to do something that they don't see as being efficient, or there's no numbers showing that it's efficient. ROI, your return on investment data, can help mature your process. Good return on investment will help provide that additional funding, and it's a key to your continuous improvement mechanism. What I mean by that is those numbers that you develop can show where your continuous improvement is effective and where maybe it needs a little bit more punch. ROI is actionable evidence, and it shows ergonomics positive effects on all these things: morale, productivity, profit, injury rate reduction, absenteeism, and presenteeism. Next. So I talked earlier about leading and lagging indicators. A lot of your metrics and data is going to come from both of these things. A lot of them are what I call recognized leading and lagging indicators. In other words, things that the industry says, this is what you should follow. These are the things that you should track, those kinds of deals. Data will also come from your own case studies. The metrics that you have and that you have developed are going to be the basis for the start of the process, where you can baseline, and then from there you build your metrics off of that baseline so you can see where you're going, if you're improving, if you flatlined, and those kinds of things. Metrics will also show you where your process needs some more help. So what are leading and lagging indicators? Let's go ahead and dive into those next. Leading indicators are when properly developed, can build a best practice. This shows that your organization is proactive and you're in front of injuries and you're not chasing injuries. Use it to flesh out your case studies, and leading indicators will become lagging as they're archived. So as you're driving daily and monthly data, that daily, monthly data, once that day or month passes and you get to the end of the year, all that gets archived into 2017 or 2016 or 2015. That then becomes a lagging indicator. But as you're working it, it is a leading indicator. Some of the best examples of leading indicators: how many ergonomic opportunities are identified and corrected? And what that means by identified and corrected is how many problems, high risk, how many issues with workstations and things like that have you found, and how many of those have been fixed, so that percentage. The reduction of musculoskeletal disease risk factors. How many high-risk folks have gone down to medium risk? How many mediums to low? If you have an organization that has a lot of trouble with neck pain, a lot of trouble with back pain, how have you impacted that? How have you mitigated that risk? Employee perception surveys. Here we do one, I think, every other year. At Honeywell, we did one annually. And some of the questions in there are loaded towards ergonomics and health and wellness. You know, does the company care about my safety? Does the company consider me more than a number? Those types of questions. And those numbers can kind of tell you whether or not you're on the right track with your safety, your ergonomics, your wellness, and basically those processes as a whole. Safety audits. A lot of organizations do safety audits. We did one annually at Honeywell, and it was involved. It was a very deep dive, probably 500 to 600 questions. So it was an incredibly labor-intensive thing. But once we got to the end of that, it took probably a month to get it done. We knew where we stood every year, and we knew where we had room for improvement, and we knew what was the best practice, and we could kind of put that on autopilot. High-risk employee reduction. How many high-risk employees do you have, and how many month to month are you reducing through your ergonomics and your wellness processes? And an ROI, how much is your return on investment monthly? And you can track that monthly by, if you're improving your high risk employees and dropping them down into medium and low risk, there's a monetary aspect that you can track from that. Next. So lagging indicators. This is generally historical data. Injury trends, days away, healthcare cost runs. And lagging indicators are really good to see what you initially need to focus your effort on. And it's also a really good way to see at the end of the year where you ended up and where you need to baseline and jump off for the next year. And some of the better ones that are listed here, the OSHA 300 logs. Those are OSHA recorded reportable injuries, something higher than first aid. Your near miss trends, how many near miss trends? Do you have a process to track near misses? A lot of this is more industrial slips, trips, and falls, things like that. But it also happens in the workplace. Somebody lifting a box of copy paper wrong. Maybe they got up out of their chair wrong or something like that and almost fell. Those are near misses, those kinds of things. Are we trending in the right direction? Are we being a little bit more situationally aware of our workplace while we're at work, which helps us drive down our near misses? Workman comp costs. You can look at the historical data annually for that to see if you're driving that down, or is it flatlining, or is it hopefully not going up. Incident rates, how many incidents have there been overall? This is kind of a total of your recordables, your near misses, and first aid type rates. Productivity trends, that's kind of more industry and manufacturing. And absenteeism rates, you can kind of see how your sick days away are trending. Are they trending positively, or we have seen an increase? We're seeing an increase in absentee through sick day rates. It might be time to look and see where the process is going and how we can better improve it. Next. So using some online tools to build metrics. So what do you want to measure? Do you want to measure injury rates? Do you want to measure healthcare cost runs? Your productivity, process efficiencies, high, medium, and low risk workstations. For a primary office environment, probably the key one here would be high, medium, and low risk workstations. And those types of tasks that are causing folks to be high risk. That's where you're going to make the more bang for your buck, because once you can figure that piece out, your process efficiency and your productivity will basically go up just on their own, because you've made people more efficient, more comfortable in their workstations. And with those two things happening, your healthcare cost runs and your injury rates will naturally kind of drop, because everybody's healthier and a lot more comfortable in their workstations. And so how do you want to measure those things? Do we want to do leading and lagging? Preferably you want to do both. You want to be able to do some lagging indicators to baseline your organization, and then start building your leading indicators to help you improve your continuous improvement. Next. So a lot of companies already have some metrics that they can tap into. HR typically has data on days away rates, workman comp costs, productivity trends are generally there, depending on what type of an environment it is. So those things are kind of already built into a lot of organizations. Other things that are available, you can build your own spreadsheets, and believe me, I've got spreadsheets for days that I use in addition to my online tools, but I have some spreadsheets that I track other data that becomes kind of important when it comes to continuous improvement and tracking money. OSHA logs, your healthcare cost runs, your worker comp costs, that varies from state to state and from organization to organization. If they're not self-insured, or if they're self-insured, a lot of that will also impact your healthcare cost runs and your insurance rates as well. And productivity markers, again, that's more for industry and manufacturing, and it's especially true for anybody who's running a Six Sigma lean type of an organization. Next. So online tools, I'll tell you what, if I didn't have online tools, I wouldn't be nearly as efficient as I am now. When I was at Honeywell, I was the only ergonomist for 800 people, and I probably averaged 300 and some assessments a year. If I didn't have the online tool to help me analyze who's high, medium, and low risks, I would have spent a whole lot of time on some folks who didn't need a whole lot of time, and not a whole lot of time on probably the folks that I needed to spend more time on most. And up here, I have 2,000 people I'm working with, and I'm still only the only ergonomist. So online tools are very critical, especially the larger the organization you have, and also if they're spread out. So National American University, you guys are all over the place. And so an online tool would be really good for your organization to be able to track other sites and to understand where your risks are and where you can kind of make the most bang for your buck. A lot of these tools have built-in training, so you don't have to make up training to give to your employees. They can do the assessment and they get assigned training, or there's training first and then they do an assessment. But a lot of the tools nowadays, they already have the stuff built in, so you don't have to do that yourself. And that training metric is tracked for you, so there's already automatically a leading metric that you can follow. How many of my employees are being trained and how many are trained efficiently. They're almost all customizable to fit your organization. So if there's certain things that you don't need to look at, but there are certain aspects that you want to highlight, a lot of these companies that have these tools will custom build it for your organization to fit exactly what you need. And the big thing is pick one you're comfortable with. A lot of these companies will let you trial the software. They'll let you test it out on a small group of people. And they'll either make that offer free or they'll deduct it from the cost if you purchase it down the road. But online tools, I'm telling you, they make you so much more efficient nowadays. Next. So, and then you can also develop some of your own internal metrics. This is some of the stuff that I track outside of the tool. Ergonomic correction action effectiveness. How effective was the adjustments that we did to a workstation? The percentage of workstations that are low, medium, or high risk. Baseline and annually using your online tool, but also use your outside metrics. You know, how efficient is facilities in getting work done? When they made that adjustment, was that adjustment exactly what you asked them to do, or did it have to go back and get retweaked? If it got retweaked, and then that shows a deficiency in how effective that corrective action was done. Proactively mitigating high risk. I made a real simple spreadsheet. It's direct costs plus your indirect cost minus your equipment cost minus your labor costs, and that's your savings. It really just shows you how much money you're saving on every potential injury that you have. It took me a while to get the finance guys to kind of understand that these are potential injuries, and so they didn't understand potential money. And I just kind of told them, well, the difference would be is if I let all these folks go to become an injury, this is the money we would lose in workman comp costs. And then the light bulb came on. So it was a little bit harder for them initially to understand money that really isn't there, but it's money that has been saved because you'll never have to spend it. Okay. The return on work, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, as you've been talking, I was thinking that the front end costs, would that plus the inability to see what you might save or believe what you might save would be, I think, the toughest sell for most companies.
It kind of is, yeah. It really is, yeah. Next. So again, develop some more of your internal metrics, some audit results, do some audits, like I mentioned, the safety audits, ergonomic correction action effectiveness. I talked about that already. Next, I think we can go ahead and go through this one. So this is the first place I worked. This is Honeywell in Colorado Springs. It was a beautiful building, and as you're looking at that building, you look to the left, you saw Pikes Peak. It was real pretty. So the beginning, they had no formal process. We were running at 7 to 10 injuries a month, and not necessarily recordable injuries, but these are injuries that 80% of the time people had to take some time off. So they took days away. Lost productivity, people not there, bumps in overtime, so a lot of money lost. 2006, 2007, we decided to get into the voluntary protection program like I talked about earlier. We started to drop a little bit, but we still had a lot of presenteeism, and there was still a requirement for a doctor's note, and nobody had a process champion yet, so I went ahead and volunteered at this point to run the process. Next slide. So in 2008, I presented a case study to management, and what I showed was a linkage of comfort to job performance, a reduction in discomfort for those in that test bed, increases in their productivity, and then I established a limited ROI evidence that showed that if we did this company-wide, if you exponentially blew this out to a company-sized process, this is what we would save. The big thing was I got the program manager and the chief financial officer's ergonomic issues fixed. Both of them were experiencing back pain and shoulder pain, and once I got their workstations adjusted, got them new chairs and everything, their pain went away in about 2 weeks. They basically asked, well, what do I need? I said, more money. And it kind of took off from there. We dropped the doctor's note. We got on-hand supply of equipment. Corrective actions went from 3 to 4 weeks down to 2 days. So it was really a huge success. 2008 was the turning point there. Next. 2008 to 2009, we dropped from 2 per month to 5 for all of calendar year 2009, musculoskeletal disorders, in other words, workplace injuries. Again, none of these were recordable, but they got to the point where people took days off, but they never filed a comp claim. It became part of the in-processing requirement. New hires had to do it within 2 weeks of arrival. That included our subcontractors. Individual workstations had a thorough assessment and adjustment. We built a ergonomics lab in 2009 inside the facility at Honeywell. So I did all my measurements inside the lab, took those lab measurements, applied it to the workstation. So our efficiencies went through the roof as far as facilities getting the adjustment right the first time. Overall contract performance during this period rose 14%, and employee satisfaction number went up 12% because they were starting to see that there was someone there to drive a process that's going to help them become a lot more effective and a lot more injury-free. Next. So the wellness integration aspect of this program down in Colorado Springs, we built a wellness center. It was about a 1,100 square foot room. We put a cardio equipment, weight training, kettlebells, BOSU systems, TRX. I was kind of the in-house master fitness trainer because I was certified as a master fitness trainer and personal trainer. So if an employee wanted a fitness program written for them based on what they would like to accomplish, I would do that and it wouldn't cost them anything. Next. We added a company called Performance-Based Ergonomics, and they had a system called Fit to Work. So that was integrated into our online office tool. So the office tool then provided training, but we also provided wellness training within that as well. So if someone had a discomfort or anything like that, they were also given exercises and some training that they could do from a well-being aspect to be a lot more comfortable in our workstation. I wrote 125 personal fitness programs for folks. We had yoga and Zumba classes provided by a couple of employees who were certified in those areas. I'm not nearly flexible enough to do yoga, and Zumba is just way too fast for me. We also did blood pressure and weight stations throughout the facility, and I always joke when I give this presentation in Las Vegas. I always tell people, if you're going to set these things up, make sure you have people do their blood pressure before they do their weight. Otherwise, there may be a skewed number here. Next. So we also added a cyber kiosk, and Tammy, you and I talked about this before we started about the treadmill station there. The cyber kiosk was built strictly for folks to be able to go in and do their training. They couldn't do anything else in there, just training. They couldn't answer emails or surf the web. It was strictly just going through company mandated training. We put a treadmill station in there, a portable recumbent bike station, and also a sit-stand. All of them were sit-stand stations, but also a mini elliptical station. Go ahead, next slide. This room became so popular that we had to do, had to set it up like a conference room where people had to sign up to use it because it was always packed. Even our Air Force contractor folks came in and used it from time to time. Total investment for the room was less than $7,000. We had a 30% increase in on-time training completion because people wanted to go into the room. So by default, they wanted to get their training done. So that was kind of a nice thing. We also increased our sign up for the fitness center, the wellness center, by 15% after this room was built. And it also became a best practice and an OSHA best practice for four straight years running, or actually 5. Next. So the results for the case study for this particular organization, from 2010 to 2014, we had 0 musculoskeletal disorders reported throughout the organization. This is an 800-person organization, 11 remote sites around the world. The Ergonomics Lab I thought was crucial because it made me more efficient along with the online tool by being able to get the adjustments done right one time the first time, get people fitted for chairs, get people fitted for input devices, and just make the whole process a lot more efficient, a lot more comfortable. People could come into the lab at any time and start using any of the equipment in there just to see differences from what they're using to what they could be using. Overall contract performance rose 12% annually during this period. It was a Honeywell and OSHA best practice from 2010 to 2014. And during this time, from 2009 to 2014, I saved Honeywell over $25 million in potential workplace musculoskeletal disorder injuries by detecting them early, instituting the necessary corrective actions, and then following up to assure the accuracy and the effectiveness of those changes. That's a huge thing for any kind of a process. If you don't follow up, you really don't know if your changes made a difference. So the follow-ups are crucial to this actually being successful. Next slide. And some more data here. By the time I left Honeywell in September of 2014 to come up here to work for Seattle City Light. But by the time I left, we had 0 high-risk employees, and our ratio from low to medium, we had 5 low-risk employees to every 1 medium-risk employee, which is really good for that size of a organization. 0 ergonomic-related injuries for that last 5-year period. And then you can see some of the other numbers here. We obviously had 100% reduction in high risk. We recapped over $763,000 in lost productivity during this period. Dropped our organizational scores, and employee participation increased up to 97%. So we had that small case study of 55 people initially, but by the time I left, all but about 15 people had begun to participate in this program pretty much full up. And you can see the program enhancement with the online tool. It just enabled the program to be more effective. We focused on high risk. Employees did a lot of self-correction through the tool and through the visual reinforcements. And the employees then understood that there was a natural link between ergonomics and overall health and wellness and their well-being. And so that whole process just flowed. It was almost effortlessly by that time I had left, which was kind of cool to see. Next. Which brings us to where I am now, Seattle City Light. Public utility. It is the nation's greenest utility. I know this because we made a sticker that says that, nation's greenest utility. That's always my joke in Las Vegas, because people look, how do you know this? Anyway, so we have several major sites, the Municipal Tower and the 901 building. Those 2 buildings are strictly office folks, whereas the other ones are a combination of office and field workers, industrial workers. Okay, next. We have roughly 1,800. That balloons up sometimes to around 2,000 employees. Right now, I think we're sitting at about 1,850. But generally, about 800 office workers, right around 1,000 field and utility workers. The field utility workers primarily are electrical utility workers, obviously, but we also have 15 other trades that, you know, janitorial to warehousing to vegetation management. So there's a lot of different trades that they're incorporated here: plumbers, carpenters, painters, that kind of thing. Next. So my initial emphasis, and still my emphasis, and I've been here about 3 years now, is to get us from reactive to proactive. And I have to say, with the office process, we are a lot more proactive than reactive. The field process, which I'm not going to cover here, we're still a little bit more reactive than proactive, but we're getting there because we're getting more involvement, which is nice. I analyzed a lot of the old data from the 300 logs, the near-miss data, and then I built a plan to kind of go forward. And the whole thing was basically stop chasing injuries, because that's all we were doing here. There was no process owner, there was no process, there's no document, there was no process for anything. So nobody had anything to follow, say this is what we should be doing. So I kind of knew that's what we needed to do: build a process, stop chasing injuries, and then we can kind of go forward from there. Next. So what was not there was some of the things I just discussed. We didn't have any online tools. Well, actually they had one, but it was really ineffective. And I say that because of this: the online tool that was here before I changed it, people could see their score. So you could manipulate your score to get what you want. It wasn't really necessarily an accurate assessment of that person's true risk, but it was their true risk based on, you know, Bob has a new chair, I need a new chair. So now I'm going to drive my score up so I can get my new chair. So those numbers, I didn't like the fact that they could see their score. Unlike Honeywell, wellness and ergonomics owners were 2 separate entities. And like I mentioned, Tammy, some organizations are still trying to learn how to cross-integrate, and that we're still learning that aspect here. We're getting a little bit better, but there's more crosstalk than when I first got here. We sat beside each other, rarely said 2 words to each other. It's kind of weird. Next. So what was available? I had a lot of support. They being the managers here, and the organization Seattle City Light as a whole, instituted a 5-year safety initiative to drive down injury rates. This organization averages 100 recordable injuries a year, which is insane for the size of the organization. Ergonomics is a key part of that. The Safe Habits, Safe Worker program, building the process, We wanted to transition from reactive to proactive. And we wanted to show the wellness linkage to ergonomics. Those were the things that I really wanted to get into people's heads. If we did these things, this organization would be a lot more efficient, a lot more productive, and we have a ton less injuries. Management support was there. The buy-in was there. The budget was available, so we were able to install online tools. And then the budget was there. I was able to get some input devices, things like that, so I get a try before you buy kind of a stock on hand, so folks could try mice and keyboards before. Because a lot of these folks were so ingrained in, this is your keyboard, this is your mouse, this is all you get to use ever. When you introduce them to a vertical mouse, you introduce them to an ergonomically designed keyboard, they kind of freak out. If you can get them to be able to try them before you actually go out and buy them their own, they're more inclined to kind of give it a test drive, and then you can better fit those devices to the person and not waste a lot of money. Next. So we're kind of where we're at now. We've developed a draft process. Well, actually, it got signed off, so it's not really a draft process anymore. It is an ergonomics process. It's very clear and concise on how to run the process, who's in charge, who our stakeholders are. Monthly analysis and metrics include the productivity, positive tracking of musculoskeletal disorder mitigation, our organizational risk score, we track that monthly, and where we're trending using some analysis in the spreadsheets that I've developed. So all these things are now in place, and they're starting to function a lot more efficiently the more mature this program gets. Next. So we got Comfort Zone as an online tool back when I first got here. I started with about 80 employees in the tool, and now we've actually are closer to 600, so almost 600 out of the 800. So about 75% of the organization now is participating in the online tool. The organizational risk score, as you can see, was kind of a medium. We had a lot of high-risk employees initially. Just out of that 80, over half were high risk. And we were losing 48 minutes a day in productivity at an annual cost per employee of $16,000. So that was our baseline. That's where we kind of started. Next. So the office metrics to date now, you can see that the risk score has dropped significantly. We've actually reduced our lost productivity. The tool can measure that because as you eliminate awkward postures, you eliminate things that workers thought they were unable to do, and you get the adjustments to where they're comfortable, that shows that they're going to be more efficient over time. Washington State did a study that a ergonomically correct workstation can increase the performance of a worker between 12 to 15%. So that's kind of where this is based on. And we were able to also reduce the lost productivity down from 48 minutes down to 30 minutes. So we're making some really good progress there. The results of the office tracking as well, 90 high-risk cases so far to date. That's from October until May of this year. 9.87 million in potential cost was avoided so far, and we only spent $140,000 mitigating these risks. So we're getting a return on our investment of over 70 to 1, which is remarkable. Generally, a process like this, anywhere from 7 to 10% is generally pretty solid. 15% is really good. So 70% is really high. Now, as this matures, that ROI number is probably going to go down a little bit because we don't have as many high-risk cases to mitigate. So you'll see that number go down over time. That's not a reflection of how bad the process is. That's actually a reflection of how much more efficient and proactive we are as an organization to fix risk before it becomes a claim or an injury. And the ROI, the return on investment, is right around 2.2 months that we earn that $140K back that we spent. Next.
Oops. Trying. There we go.
It's okay. So our annual productivity gains based on our measurements using the tool, as you can see, we've over $500,000 a year in recouped lost productivity by more efficiencies, less high risks, less days away, less time off, those kinds of things. All that impact the annual productivity gains. And then follow-ups with the high-risk employees. What I did is I built a separate spreadsheet, pulled that data out of the tool. I wanted to know how efficient the high-risk employees are and how much better they are doing with their scores. So every year I have the high-risk employees redo their assessment. So far, they're the only ones that I have that have to do theirs annually. And as you can see, every year, the users, the guys that have been using the tool for a couple of years, 63% reduction in their risk. 2016, 58%, and those who have just started using, even in just a short period of time here, 8 months, or actually 11 months now, 36% reduction. So that's a really good score to show managers and supervisors that, hey, look, the longer we get people in this program, the better they're going to feel long term. Next. So some additional metrics. I worked with the return to work coordinator. She actually sits right in front of me. We were able to reduce our return to work open cases from 36 to 21 in 1 year. We had a reduction of 5% of out of work time, with ergo intervention and an analysis of light duty return to work. And then we reduced our comp costs by 4.5% in a year. So that's pretty significant considering the comp structure here. That's actually a really good number. Next. So updated and improved internal ergonomic page is available. I've got training tips, slide decks, all kinds of things that run the gamut from sit-stand station to home ergonomics, the pamphlets on office ergonomics. I also have one on mobile ergonomics and also another pamphlet on field ergonomics. So all these things are available to the workers, stretching guides, things of that nature. All that stuff is in this page. We have an internal info pages on Yammer, so I don't know how to tell you what Yammer is. Yammer is kind of, I don't know, like a SharePoint page. Yeah, it's just employee access only, so there's news and highlights, there's training, there's some helpful tips there. Comfort Zone augmented other training. I actually built the decks that I put into Comfort Zone, so that way they all were Seattle City Light specific trainings. So anytime an awkward posture or unable or discomfort level is reported, it triggers that training to be automatically assigned to an employee. So it further augments their knowledge and understanding of how they interact with their workplace. Next. So wellness integrations, and that's always kind of my little funny thing. Your muscles called, they want you back. So the wellness program is an integral part of the safety team, and it provides the support for ergonomics through various initiatives, the stretching plans that are tailored to specific jobs. We're trying to actually gear a lot more of this general fitness and the stretching and things like that to the field workers more than the office workers, because they're more of our higher risk employees as far as musculoskeletal pains and neck and back injuries and things like that. But all this stuff is also available to office workers. And they also support and lend their expertise to return to work, fit for duty testing and pre-employment testing. Those two bottom categories are strictly more for the industrial side of the house. We don't do fit for duty testing for office workers. I don't think anybody does, not that I can recall. So we use Virgin Pulse. Now that particular online wellness and well-being tool may get changed. I don't know. They're kind of in discussions about that now. But right now we're using Virgin Pulse. So it's an interactive online system. You can sync your Fitbit or your whatever you're using, your Garmin, or you can use the one that the company Virgin Pulse provides. You can track your goals, you can track your heartbeat, your weight, everything. You do all that stuff. You can actually have family members sign up to 3 family members. So it's really a really nice biometrics, heart rate activities, all that quality of life programs, stress management, time management, all that stuff's built into this Virgin Pulse tool. Next. And we're also looking to hire a new wellness person here down the road because ours just retired. So ergonomics and wellness, it can create a more pain-free, happier employee. It really will help you lower your injury rates, lower your absenteeism. But the big thing is it's going to impact your productivity. People are going to be way more efficient at work because they're comfortable. The workstation fits them. They're able to get where they need to go, grab what they need to grab, everything. They're in good postures. Their back doesn't hurt. Their feet don't hurt. All that stuff is important in having people more productive. And when you can do that, then those other things that I listed above, the presenteeism, the absenteeism, and the injury rates will all drop. When you combine these together in ergonomics and a wellness initiative, a well-being program, it'll help lower stress because people are in better shape. They're taking better care of themselves. They're eating better. They're recognizing stress. They know how to mitigate the stress. They're maybe taking better aim at their time management skills. You can improve their overall health, but you'll lower your costs. And they complement each other by lowering your healthcare cost runs. And if you're self-insured, that's important. If you can lower your self-insured rate, That's a huge boon to money that you can put into infrastructure, other projects, or better workstations. Next. So the online tool usage, I can't say this enough. This stuff is very important. The larger the organization and the less folks that you have helping you do ergonomics and health and wellness, the more an online tool becomes critical in being able to organize your flow of work and your priorities, so you can kind of attack who needs to be attacked first, and then just kind of guide the other folks along, and then they can kind of just self-correct a lot of things on their own. So online tools are they're just, whoever first came up with these things, this is genius. And it really is a huge bonus. And like I said, if you're a spread out organization like we are here, and like National American University is, online tools are important, because then you can work with these remote sites and maybe cut down on your travel costs, because then you don't physically have to go see somebody. They can take pictures, they can take a video, and from that you can analyze using the tool and determine a course of action to fix what they need to have fixed. Employees feel more engaged, and they're part of the solution because they're actively involved in their own corrective actions. It, like I said, helps me become more efficient. And then you can link internally developed training, or a lot of those online tools already have their own training built in. So if something's wrong, it'll trigger a training sequence for someone to look at. Maybe the employee can fix it on a run. You don't have to go see them. And it saves time. There's no dual entry of ergo assessments or equipment, and you're not tripping over, your left hand knows what your right hand's doing all the time, so to speak. Next. So again, how do you start? You want to start with test groups. Choose and chase the low-hanging fruit. Anything that looks like an easy fix, fix it. Something that you can get done for an immediate impact. If you have both industrial and office, try to get about 30 people for each of those dynamic case studies. Build and validate your metrics. And as you can see, there's kind of a circle. Ergonomics equals cost savings. It boosts your employee morale, your productivity and your quality go up, your profits go up, and your ROI can go through the roof the more efficient that process becomes. Next. And that's it. Like I said, my name is Keith Osborne, and I'll field any questions that you have now.
Thanks, Keith. I have a couple questions while others are thinking of their questions or typing them into the chat box. And I'll also just open up everybody's microphone so they can be prepared to ask a question too. Mike, I just have I have two questions. When you talk about at-risk employees, you're really talking not the job they do, but employees who may track high on the number of days they're out of the office, or
yeah, the at-risk employees are generally the ones who are in the online tool, and based on their answers, they are a high-risk employee. Those are your at-risk folks. In an industrial or manufacturing setting, however, at-risk could be the job task. But in an office setting, it's generally who scores up higher on the online tool. Yeah.
Okay. And my second question, and then I'll turn it over to the alumni employees who are on the line. You had mentioned an example with your program manager and your CFO about having shoulder and back pain. Typically, do you find that employees associate their office environment with the aches and pains they might be experiencing, or is that kind of come with the awareness of a wellness program or a very intentional ergonomics program?
Honestly, a little bit of both. I think the fact that for the case with Honeywell, the fact that we were starting the program and they were aware that this was available, I think it made them a little bit more aware of, well, maybe it's this chair that I'm not sitting right in it. This desk is kind of hinky. My arm hurts. I lean on my right side, which then makes my shoulder hurt. Those kinds of things. So I think that makes them a little bit more aware. The wellness aspect, we really encouraged a healthy lifestyle in Colorado. And we do here in Seattle too, but in Colorado was really a point of emphasis to get people up and moving. And I think as people did those things in their off work times, and they kind of came back to work, and then they became sedentary again, anything they may or may not have done while they were off gets magnified. So that pain gets magnified. And so I think that knowledge and that situational awareness, was key to really jumping that thing off and making it a success. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All All right, anyone
Sure.
on the line have any questions? Got a few people still with us? No? Okay, well, this, as I said early on in the chat box, I will be recording this and distributing it to all alumni and employees. So, I mean, it was really informative. Stanley, do you have a question?
No, just thank you very much. Very interesting.
Oh, you're welcome, Stanley. Thank you. Thanks for attending.
Yep.
So I'll get this content out, Keith, to
Okay.
our entire alumni and employee base. It's really helpful and informative, and I hope inspires good action on behalf of the employers represented here.
Great. And like I said, if you need any help in the future, let me know and I'll shoot those pamphlets to you.
All right.
as
Yes,
well.
I would love that. And I can further, if it's okay with you, I'll further share that with our alumni.
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
All right. Thanks, Keith. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for setting us up, Tammy. I appreciate it.